And we are live. Today was just a couple minutes of delay because, technology sometimes gets in the way. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FreudenFreude weekly podcast, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
Hi, I'm Sandra Corona.
And I'm
And
Claudia. We
we are
are coaches.
coaches.
We are
Great,
coaches.
great. So I am a coach for leaders, for mid-management and neurodiverse professionals.
And I work with professionals, corporate leaders, as well as their teams in tech and beyond. So today, another episode in our intercultural intelligence series. There we go. And today we are continuing our 101 series of introductions to cultural dimensions. And today's lineup is about short-term versus long-term orientation. Again, to put it a little bit into a framework, these cultural dimensions are kind of like lenses or characteristics through which we can look at culture. Now we kind of piecemeal them by focusing on one at a time, but typically there's this intricate interplay of all the different dimensions, and looking at a situation, a context through one of them is typically not what we are after, but we just want to grow awareness that this is also one of the factors that can determine, how a situation will unfold depending on all the players that are in it. So, short-term versus long-term orientation, how would you introduce it, Sandra?
Let me think this one. Okay, so when I think about short-term, it is instant gratification. It is the need to obtain something without focusing on the future. It is about valuing traditions and focusing on what am I going to get? What is in it for me right now? And then long term, the opposite of short term. But it has a kinder, it has it has a kindness to it, because it is about focusing on what you're going to get if you invest, if you put the effort and the work into it, rather than to focus on what is in it for you at this moment.
Right.
That's how I would do it.
Right, like the long-term orientation has this future-orientedness in it that transcends the current moment or the short term. So there's persistence and investment in the future and planning, and there's this whole like view that it doesn't stop today or tomorrow or in a year. It's much more a longer term view. And actually we talk in this as a cultural dimension, but it's also sometimes a personality trait. Some people, even though they are imbued in a culture that is maybe more long term, they might be opportunists. They might be just somebody who prefers to get short term gains over and short term gratification, instant gratification, versus investing more into the future. So definitely it can be seen just in a person and as a personal preference, a personality trait. But on the other hand, this is something that also teams and companies and all kinds of social groups or culture groups and entire ethnicities and entire countries exhibit. Okay, so let's take a little bit broader view at the repercussions of these two views that it can actually have. So if we look a little bit at at some of the characteristics that this has, and I'm glancing also at my notes here. So in the short term, this instant gratification, absolutely. It's like after me the deluge, and let's just go for, I don't know, profits now, or let's go for fun now. And then what happens later, I don't really care. Interestingly enough, it can be, it can also, for instance, impact the way that people perceive dating, right? If it's short term kind of thing, I'm not necessarily equating it to one night stands being a free for all, but it's much more like, yeah, okay. Not every relationship that I start needs to be a marriage oriented relationship,
Right.
for instance, right? It can also just be a summer fling and with good intentions and not any like bad meaning behind it, but it's okay if it's short term and I'm going to enjoy it as such. Versus in long term orientations, very often there is this, if I'm going to invest in this, let's see if it is actually a good prospect for marriage and a life together. It's a real consideration. And what surprised me a little bit, as I was investigating this orientation, and I would love to hear your comments on it. That yes, on one hand, in the short-term orientation, you have the sense of opportunism or maybe even fatalism. I get all of out of it that I can. That is one way that culture groups or people deal with this orientation. But incidentally enough, it also brings out a sense of holding on to tradition and not rocking the boat. And and risk aversion, right? Like, let's keep things steady. And in the end, it makes sense because they are not investing in creating a better future. They're not thinking about that, but they still, as humans, we still want some kind of stability. And so you have the opportunistic camp, but then you also have the very traditionalist camp. Let's keep things as they are. Let's take advantage of it now, but let's not rock the boat too much because that's all we have and probably all we're gonna have. So
Right.
was that a dichotomy that perplexed you maybe a little bit as well? Because I was really like, what? That's not something I expected. But after thinking about it for a while, I understood a little bit better.
Yeah, actually, one of the characteristics is that it says that they value stability, right? And when you think about the companies that they have this typical phrase, this is how we do things, it is the typical, let's say, scenario of what you were explaining, where, we don't invest. This is how we do things because this is what we're comfortable with, right? This is our comfort zone, and this is how far we're going to grow, and it's working, and it's, we feel comfortable. So I think when you talk about resisting change, the preference is stability and continuity, right? So let's just go this way, why change? Why fix what's not broken, right? And let's just go, let's keep the boat sailing in the same place without any change, even if the fish are scattering, right? Who cares? They're going to come back next year. That kind of idea, that kind of thought. So yes, it did resonate with me what you said.
So
Definitely.
really, I mean, just this thing that short-term orientation is often the ones that look at, the tradition that is a long-term tradition being maintained. It
Mm-hmm.
makes even more sense that that's the case if you look at the long-term orientation because they are very motivated to innovate, to
Mm-hmm.
to go beyond, to learn, to create a better future. Because very often the time horizon that they're looking at is not short, and they might think about their children, right? There's even there's I don't remember which tribe it is that does this. But whenever the tribe and the elders of the tribe take a decision, they're always consciously asking, how is this going to be 7 generations from now?
Mhm.
True long term, long term impact, right? And that's how they make decisions really long term. But I think that in companies nowadays and so on, the ones that look beyond tomorrow are the ones that innovate, that are investing in employee development, that are investing in retaining and building client that talent. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Right? And they are perfectly okay with making these investments and have a delayed gratification. We realize that all this R&D that we're putting in, for instance, is going to be maybe even painful in the short term. But, we have this vision of this gratification happening in 3 years when a product hits the market, or a new technology for the betterment of humanity brings us big profits, right? So,
Right.
and incidentally, I think that it also correlates, because it is grounded in this in this meaningful future vision, is that there's often a very strong work ethic, that people feel good, like the people in those kind of environments feel good about investing themselves, and very often they work quite hard about it, quite hard in it. And so that's and we'll do some examples in a little bit about long-term versus short-term orientation. But I hope that people are realizing that, yes, indeed, as I look at maybe a workplace context or a community conflict or whatever, now I understand that some of these parties that are involved in this are maybe more short-term oriented, and others, yeah, I can see that they have more long-term orientation. It helps us to understand a little bit the motivations behind the behaviors that people or culture groups exhibit. Do you maybe, I mean, do you have something else to add, or do you have maybe an example that you can share with us?
No, I mean, you gave a really good reasoning behind the long term and short term. As an example, the one thing I thought about is marriage, and like you were saying, dating, and how many times, because of tradition, you marry a person, right? Like you say, you're in a relationship, and suddenly you start living together, maybe out of comfort, maybe out of time that you've been spending with a person, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they are marriage material. However, your tradition is calling for that. Hey, if you're going to stay together, and since you're not breaking up, you might as well get married. And there is no visioning of how this is going to impact your life in the long term, right? You're probably going to end up getting divorced, but because you're living together and you've invested all this time, you feel that because of tradition and norm, let's get married. And boom, what happens? 2 years down the road, you're getting divorced.
Right, and even
So,
I think even the it's probably the wrong word, but the ease which certain people contemplate divorce is also impacted by this. because
Yeah.
that's also a thing that says, okay, so this was just for the short term, so let's stop it and start something else that may or may not be short term or long term,
Yeah.
versus maybe how much do you want to invest into salvaging a relationship, because for you it was a long-term prospect and something that you committed to for the long
Mhm.
term. I think that even divorce things, when times get rocky, divorce decisions are also impacted potentially by this short-term versus long-term orientation. And because some people that I know, they have stayed in marriages that sometimes were rocky, but they nevertheless stuck together and worked it out. And others get divorced just like that. And so maybe that has also an impact. Very good example. Yeah, very good
Now,
example.
another example, if you don't mind me saying, is your finances, right?
Mm.
Finances is another reason why a lot of people nowadays find themselves in such tight situation. Out of good news, at least in the US, the minimum wage is going to increase to $15. So a couple of states were doing it. Now the minimum wage is going to be all around the US $15, which is a pretty good deal considering all the inflation. Now, if you think about how a lot of people right now, a lot of young people are talking about how, remember millennials that they were making fun of them. So sorry, millennials, that they were making fun of them about not being able to afford an avocado toast or milk or eggs or whatever. You know, it kind of puts it in a situation where you have to think about your finances, so how young you are, because it's generational, right? It also is a generational thing. As you age is how you start giving value to things. Let's also be honest in that. My political views have changed as I've aged. My finance views have changed, depending on who depends on you and your responsibility. I mean, there's so many things behind that word finance that you really cannot say specifically. But if we're talking about age-wise, let's remember our generation, Claudia. I'm going to talk about my generation. All I remember is that I just went and had fun. As long as I, number one, had money to pay my rent, two, had money to buy food for my dogs and for myself, and my cell phone. That was it. TV, I could care less about TV. I could care less about everything else because my basic needs were being covered. And then I could go and have fun. That's what I remember. The short term, the instant gratification was let's go have fun, let's drink, let's enjoy, let's live, let's do all of these kind of things. And then the consequence was not in my money so much. It was about waking up the next day. Remember we would talk about my party days?
I was, yes, we talked about your party days, and we touched on the fact that food was very different. Because when I was young, my focus, since we're talking about financials here, was to pay back student loans as quickly as possible, and that was it for me. And I think that even the short-term versus long-term orientation plays into that, right? Into saving habits and the way that we deal with debt.
Mhm.
Debt is something that can stretch out forever. I mean, credit card debt can stretch out forever if you let it. And I think that the sense of I want a debt-free future in 5 years or 3 years or 20 years, however long it takes you, or to pay off your debt, your credit card debt and or your mortgage and things like that. I was very focused on that in my early working life, right? Get rid of the debt. I couldn't stand it. And because I wanted a future without that. And I wouldn't
Mhm.
have, I was very careful with how much money I spent on entertainment. And I was never a drinker anyway. So cheap date here, people, cheap date. But, it was, you see that even though we're quite from the same generation, we only have, very few years between us. But, the outlook I think is very different, and here you
Mhm.
see that at least in your youth you had a maybe shorter term orientation versus I
Mhm.
had already, as finances are concerned, this longer term orientation. So very, very interesting. Yeah. So spending behaviors, but also saving behaviors. Some it's like, yeah, I have money, I'll spend it now. I have a good life now. I enjoy
Mhm.
experiential things. Others
Mhm.
say, no, I feel better if I save money and I build this nest egg that gives me security not only now, but also in the future. So very, very
Yes.
good example of this orientation. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Good one.
Perfect. Yes. Please go ahead now. Your turn. What do you think? What's your example?
Well, maybe before we go into like workplace examples, what about the environment? Hmm? Environment.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. You
I
want
mean,
to go ahead?
right. I mean, how much does a society invest in cultural, sorry, in environmental preservation? Do we as a society invest money into alternative energy sources and so on to maybe make this there, or are we perfectly okay with just taking the top of mountains and taking out the coal as we did in the old days and having coal fired things, or all these kind of things. It's how much do we prioritize the sustainability, renewable energy, conservation, pollution, right? So how much do we do to keep that at bay? Do we not care because
Mhm.
we are still kind of okay and future generations be darned, okay?
Mhm.
Or do we really already try to clean up our act now, to build a better future together? So I think that's also really something that changes from society to society, from culture group to culture group. What do you think?
You know how funny when you mentioned the environment, because I was thinking about the American Indian, right? All all native cultures, or at least the ones that I've looked into the most. Let's say, for example, from Brazil, from Central America, from North America, um, and that's all I can say right now. I, they're all into doing the old traditions, right? How to conserve the land. And I think I find it, I wish we would listen to them more. That's the truth. I think they, like you said, you said that there was uh, you called it a word, a tribe that considers the 6 to 7 generations ahead, right, before making a decision. So I do believe that Native people have a better idea how to preserve the land and how to fix it, how to cure it. And if we would to listen a little bit more, look, two things could happen. Let's be honest. One, there wouldn't be too much progress. And two, we would have more land. So those two things can't come together, apparently. I think we're working on it. I think not everybody is always going to be happy. I think there's always going to be ambition. There's always going to be a desire to enjoy. And as long as we keep on fighting, and as long as we keep on fighting for the middle, I think that's the problem. There's never a middle,
Right,
right?
right.
Because, like I said, you cannot have progress and nature at the same time. And that is so sad.
Well, I think the challenge is to find ways that you can have both. And maybe you can't necessarily get the speed of progress, or the exact flavor of progress that you want if you keep sustainability in the back of your mind. But progress is inevitable, because I think that plateauing and stagnating is a myth. Either you grow or you decline. So I think that there needs to be growth. My personal opinion, of course, there needs to be growth, but it has to be done.
Sustainable.
Yes, it has to be made with keeping the sustainability and the planet in mind, right? It really does. While you were talking, I was looking up this tribe. It was the 7 generations, and people can in their browser search for the seventh generation principle, and
Oh,
the tribe is called the Haudenosaunee, or
okay.
the Iroquois. So no
Okay.
idea where they are, okay, but it exists. If you do a search for the seventh generation principle, you will find more information on it. When I heard
Wonderful.
about it a long time ago, it was such a nice way of thinking about it that I kind of remembered, but the tribe name, no, I didn't remember. So good, very good.
Very
Yeah,
good. Thank you for sharing.
sustainability is one of those things, right? And if you look, I think there's also, I think what impacts is how much evidence do we get. If you look, for instance, at the climate and global warming has been a topic since I
Yeah.
was young. I mean, this is not a new topic. Go back to the 80s and the 90s, and there were people already talking about global warming and warning against it and things like that. And now,
Yeah.
as you look across the globe, how crazy the weather is starting to be, and really record temperatures being breached, and storms, and all that kind of stuff. Now, I think that the decision becomes more obvious, right? If it was back in the 90s and you thought about sustainability, you didn't feel yet that it is indeed a relatively short-term thing that can happen, a this generation thing that can happen. But maybe you thought,
Mhm.
okay, it's like 4 or 5 generations from now, and maybe I don't need to worry as much about it. I apologize. But now
Mhm.
now it starts to be like, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more aware of this. So it has become a little bit more urgent, I think. So, yeah.
Correct. Um, what other thing I was thinking about earlier? Oh gosh. Okay, maybe it will come up for me. I can tell you one thing. I can tell you that even though I'm not leaving, unfortunately, I'm not leaving children behind. I still worry because I enjoy nature. I still worry about the future. I worry about how it affects people cognitively, their mental health, how it affects uh, every single decision. You work in a company. If you work in a company, the company is going to make decisions based on the environment, based on finances. I mean, we're talking about the things that we've been talking about, which is environment, finances, life, your personal life, um, the minimum wage, all those kind of things. Your life is impacted in every single aspect, and we just never really truly pay attention to that. I think one of the things that I was thinking about earlier, it's almost coming to me. Um, is about, you know what, it does it I needs to click. It needs to click.
Like,
Is there anything else you need to talk about, Claudia, while I think about it, please?
right. While we wait for the click moment, it's said. Yeah, I mean, I touched already on this earlier. If we look at companies, which is always, for us at least, also because of the jobs that we do, an interesting microcosm to look at. But I touched already on it. There's taking risks and spending on innovation, foregoing on occasion these short-term profits for something, down the line that promises, I think is really important. This focus on research and development rather than milking a current product for all it's got. And then, even some companies go even so far as, okay, if after this product the bubble bursts and the company goes under, no big deal, I just move to a different company, or we reinvent the company some other way. I mean, some companies are like that. But others really the steady, let's invest, let's be mindful about how this company is going to be in 10 years, and so on. Even though nowadays with VUCA and how volatile everything is, I think the future horizon is shrinking a little bit. It's very hard for executives to really predict the markets, or feel there's more sense of risk, because stuff can be changing so dramatically in a relatively short amount of time. So, you need to have really strong confidence, let's say, to take these risks and invest in R&D, because you really can't predict how the markets or societies are going to change, for that matter. And I think we all learned a lesson with COVID about that. But I think another aspect of it that's very strong is the investment, not in a project, but in employee development. And, this transcends this focus on education for long-term oriented culture groups, transcends companies. I think that even societies that have a longer-term view invest often more into the development of their children and so on. But in companies, if you plan on keeping people just by the very nature of your philosophy for the long term, you hope that they are going to stay with the company a long term, and you provide an environment that builds this loyalty and shows your loyalty to them. You invest in their development. You mentor them, you send them to courses, you really make them, you nurture them, so that later on, hopefully, they provide maximum value for the long term for your company. Versus, short-term oriented companies, they might hesitate to invest heavily into employee training. They want to minimize immediate costs, and they don't even have this expectation that people are gonna stick around. They're like, I'm not going to invest in this person when, 2 years from now, they're going to leave anyway. They're going to take all this learning that I give them, and then they're going to leave anyway. There's not even this expectation or this planning to retain people. I mean, some companies are like that. It's really short term. So I think that on the project management level, but also on a human resources level, short term versus long term orientation is very visible in company cultures. What do you think?
Look, I was thinking about, we're talking about education, and if there's anything that comes up to me about education and how, what is long term, it would be books, right? When you invest in yourself, when you invest in your employees, like, for example, we are our own companies, right? And so we invest in ourselves, we invest in our education, we invest on courses, we invest in all these kind of things. And if you think about something that has value always in your education, if you want to invest as a company, as another part of education is on books. And how many companies don't have programs on education on, hey, if you buy a book or you buy this, and if it's for the purposes of your career or whatever it is that you're practicing in the company, we will reimburse you. It happened to my husband. It happened to friends, other co-workers, colleagues, so on and so on. I can give you many examples. That is, to me, a long-term, like you said, education is always going to be long-term. Now I'm going to give you the contrary of long-term, short-term. You know what I was thinking about? Scammers. That is short-term. That is instant gratification. I mean, it takes them a long time to get what they want, right? And they have to be patient, but it's all in one single call. And you might spend 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours with the scammer, but they will get what they want. So when it comes to education, invest in yourself. Don't take the shortcut, because it really is not the answer. I mean, I don't think education has ever been the shortcut, right? There's never been a career. I mean, what are shortcuts? Not even, what are they called? I forgot right now. Oh my God. The ones that you take in college, like the
Electives.
yes, exactly. Those are short term, but they still take time. Career is the best thing you can invest. Probably also just consider, just education is the best thing. I don't have anything else to add. I think you said everything, but somehow my mind went into education is the best thing. It's long-term, short-term scammers. I don't know why I went there.
Well, yeah, because I mean, matter in point, matter in point. It's unfortunate that the coaching industry is not a very heavily regulated industry, meaning that you can call yourself a coach without necessarily having gone through a rigorous training and accreditation process and things like that. I mean, it took me years to get truly accredited. I had to, go through extensive training programs. I had to show my practice logs and things like that. So it's an involved process. But not, there's myriads of people out there that call themselves coaches that have essentially just decided to call themselves a coach and have never invested in proper education. All professional coaches have gray hairs. Yes, I do have them too, because of this particular issue. But that also, I think, is a very misguided way, because you call yourself coach and you're taking such a risk of sorry if I use strong language, but screwing the whole coaching engagement up. You can do real damage to people. Okay, and you will not necessarily, or in many cases, there will not be good outcomes out of coaching sessions that such, fly-by-night coaches or straw and chicken wire coaches, sorry about the expressions, but that coaches like that bring about. There are some that are naturally absolutely gifted as coaches. I'm not talking, at them, but there's a lot of them that have spurious motivation when it comes to coaching. And, but then what if word of mouth gets about that, you just do horrible things as a coach, or that it doesn't really work out? So rather than having gone and gotten educated and things like that, they gamble on this fact that they can just call themselves a coach, make some short-term money with some clients, often by underselling the professional coaches and underpricing them. And then, it's like, okay, so I do my best. And if it's not good enough, tough if it doesn't work out for my coachee. And that is, long term versus short term. Long term, you would go and invest in education and learn how to do things. Short term is, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try it. If it works, if it doesn't. And what people don't understand is that, sometimes it's doesn't really work out well for the coachees. And so that also is maybe a warning to people that look into coaching to really get people that have gotten education. Like Sandra is now, going through this rigorous training program. I have been doing this since 2018 when I did my first rigorous training program. And so, people should be on the lookout that not all coaches are created equal. So a long tirade, but I think it fit here because, some
Yes.
of these so-called or self-proclaimed coaches just have a very short-term orientation to their practice.
Thank you very much, because you know what, you made me remember why I went into the scammers. I was watching the TV the other day and I realized that there's this new university that suddenly popped up. And I'm like, oh my God. And how many people are not going to sign up into those programs only to find themselves, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years after, and have their education not validated? Like a certain person that ran for president, won and then lost. He had a university, and all the people that invested in the university that was named after this person, their credits were lost. The money was lost. They never got a reimbursement or anything like that. That is the scammer thing. And that is what Claudia, I agree with her. How many schools out there that say they're going to teach you coaching and all this kind of stuff? You really have to do your research in order for your education to, for the effort that you're taking, the time that you're taking, the
The,
money,
the
exactly.
money is one thing, but putting an hour after hour of studying and all that kind of stuff, that effort, shouldn't go to waste. And you bring up a very good point. Just as there's a lot of coaches out there that are kind of like, questionable in their ethics or in their education because they never got any. But even in terms of coaching schools, you have to be mindful, right? Get
Mhm.
one that is truly accredited, that has a good reputation, and not just some person out there that just hung out a shingle and calls themselves some coaching coach of coaches or school of whatever. You have to be mindful of it. And unfortunately, I have found that very often in these things, it is what you get, what you pay for. And
Right,
coaching education is very expensive. All these kind of
right.
courses are very expensive, and they have required, I'm sure also from you, a very big investment, monetary investment, and then not to
Oh,
count the
yes.
time and the hours, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, now let me piggyback on your topic, because let's talk about how education impacts your health and lifestyle, right? How investing on yourself impacts your life, impacts your habits, your mental wellness, your nutrition, exercising, all of those things. Let's talk about that. What do you think about the short term and long term about health and lifestyle? What is your opinion on that?
Well, what would I say? I think that one of the things I think that I could think of off the bat is that how aware are you that you're going to be old one day?
Yes,
Right? I
exactly.
mean, isn't that true? Like, young. That's maybe even considered the case of somebody who's 20 years younger than us, right? It's like they're in the
Yeah.
moment, they're young, they're hopefully healthy, and so on. And getting old is so far away that it's not even at the edge of their consciousness. Right, 401k, who cares? I have plenty of time. Maybe even getting married, I have plenty of time. Thinking about retirement or an end of career, end of life career. Where do I really want to end up? It's so far removed that it doesn't even come up. But I think that
Right.
people that have a longer term orientation, they're very aware that at some point they're going to get old. At some point, their children are going to be grown up. At some point, they don't have a government, or they won't be able to work, and they don't necessarily have a government that can provide for them. So maybe they need to save towards retirement funds and things like that. And it's even in their younger years, it's very clear. One day I'm going to be old, and how am I going to prepare for that, rather than live my life as it is right now with a short-term horizon, and then later I'm going to deal with it however it happens, when it happens. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the impact that it has on your decision making, right? Like you said,
Many, many aspects like health and nutrition
exactly.
and,
Yeah.
and savings, and how much you can delay maybe an instant gratification to get to where you want later on. Yeah.
Right. When I think about how I've changed, okay, let me give you an example. I was a very short-term person. I think it was very clear when I talked about my party days, comparing your lifelong, long, oh my God, long-term orientation lifestyle versus my short-term orientation lifestyle. All of this was because I had very little self-awareness. Okay. Like you said, I never thought, I knew that there was a future. I knew I wanted something. I just was too busy living life because number one, I had just gotten divorced. So when you get married and then you get divorced, oh my word, you just want to be free and enjoy life and everything else. So at some point it was long term, then short term. And then as I educated myself, which is why I was constantly rambling about education, the importance it has is that as I started reading, as I started learning about coaching, I started talking with people, um, met Chava Toth, took ICQ, met you, and then took my coaching classes. I mean, life has changed for me in such a huge way. I think now I'm a long-term person, yes, because studying requires a change of lifestyle. Being here as we are right now is a change of lifestyle, isn't it? Because you work around it, you do things because we have the life, and we make sure that we are sound of mind, at least we try.
Try.
Right.
We try our best. Yes, yes.
Exactly. Right. We do so many things in order to be present, and that has made me change so much. Now there are things, yes, there are errors that I still make. I mean, I'm not perfect, and I make them consciously. That is the best or the worst part of it all, right? However way you want to see it, depending on what we're talking about. But I think that if I talk about the short term that I still have, is that I still put priority in enjoying life. Okay. If my husband was to tell me, hey, let's go to Bahrain, let's go and have fun, most probably I would be telling him, we're going to do the live and then we go to Bahrain. Okay. Yeah. Now, long term is, you know what? I cannot drink right now. I'm going to be present with Claudia and everything else. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to study. I'm going to do all these things, right? And then I have fun. So that is how I have changed. I have put my priorities. I think it's more about priorities. I've put my priorities in order.
That's a very good point. Actually, tonight there was an EMCC workshop. EMCC is the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. I'm on the board of the local chapter, and tonight was a really interesting workshop that was offered. And I would really have loved to go an in-person workshop, but for me, when I saw the conflict in my schedule, it was very clear that I wouldn't go because I have the live. And
Hmm.
I didn't sign up for it because for me, the life is a longer term commitment. Yes, I would have
Hmm.
loved to go to this one workshop, but I made this longer term commitment that I will honor over time, because I think that maybe if any one life only has a certain amount of value, but if you look at 50 lives or more that we have done now, that starts to be a body of work that's non-negligible. And I think that for me it's very important to honor these longer term commitments, even if I have to say no to a short term kind of thing, because you might think, okay, so what does it matter if 1 week we don't have a life? Well, to me it does matter. To me it does matter, because I look at it as something that by the end of the year we are going to have maybe another 45, 50 episodes that we have recorded. Last year we recorded 46, was the break that we took in the summer and the break we took
Yeah.
at Christmas. 46 episodes last calendar year, and that's what I'm after. And I will not take it lightly to just say, okay, short term, I want to do this thing. Now I'm not going to do that. It wouldn't occur
Right.
to me, right? Yeah.
All the knowledge that we've shared, right, and all the interest and the time that we've invested. Again, it just depends on how you see it, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, that is from my end. That's all.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add, Connie?
No, I think I want to stress one more time that, this long-term versus short-term orientation is but one cultural dimension. Again, we looked at it in isolation today and gave you some of the characteristics and looked at some examples, and we isolated it just to be able to do that. But later on, as we combine it then as just one lens through which we look at a cultural situation, together with some of the things that we have already covered. We have looked at merit-based versus tradition-based cultures. We have looked at low versus high power distance. We have looked at low versus high context language. We have looked at we have looked at some other ones, and there's some more to come. There's another half dozen that we're going to go through. It's when you then look at a situation through all of those things combined, I think that it's the richness of all of this is going to come through. Another thing is that it's never 100%, meaning you're never 100% and always short-term oriented and 100% and always long-term oriented. It depends on the situation, on the context, about which culture group that you're interacting with, because you might be very different in your family than in your workplace, let's say, right? And just consider it a little bit more on a sliding scale, and stuff that can change over time as well. So it's just one color, one additional color through which you can look at a cultural situation. So it's not black and white, it's very colorful. And later on, we're going to mix all those different colors together and see, if we cannot look at some cultural dimensions and maybe see some examples of how one can look at that. But
That would be fantastic.
yeah, and I realize that as you work with these cultural things as a professional, right now I'm becoming certified as a mediator, and
Yeah.
I can then really, as I mediate, distill and get a feel for, yeah, so is some of the area of contention this low term versus short term, short term versus long term orientation, is that why
Hmm.
they have a conflict, and so on. So it is real, it is practical, and once you grow this awareness to look at things also through that angle, I think it provides richness to your interpretation and your
Right.
perception. So
Correct.
Maybe, oh, we're a couple minutes early today. So let's stop at like, roughly 53, 54 minutes today. Unless you have something to say, maybe we can close.
No, I think it's a good way to close. Thank you so much for today, Claudia. Appreciate the conversation. It was lovely.
Absolutely. Same here. Everybody, thank you so much for staying with us and listening to this episode. I hope that you got some value out of what we were talking here today. We will be back with another intercultural intelligence. God, I'm really looking for the word today. Intercultural intelligence episode in the fourth week of February. I think it's going to be February 28th, if I'm not mistaken. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the channel and otherwise engage with the content. Give us a like or post a comment in the comment section. Sandra is currently quite busy with her imminent relocation, but I am still having some spots open for coaching clients. So if that is something that you're considering as a professional, as a leader, or for a team, please get in touch. Both our contact information is included in the descriptions of this video, and you can find us easily on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
There we go. We will be back next week with more. And have a wonderful week, everybody. And thank you, Sandra. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Bye-bye, everybody.